Michigan versus the Environmental Protection Agency.
Envision, if you will, a courtroom spectacle of such magnitude that it rivals any dramatic saga, albeit one where the intrigue doesn't involve shadowy detectives or morally ambiguous heroes, but rather the meticulous hum of legal jargon and the pompous eloquence of robed justices. Enter Michigan versus the Environmental Protection Agency of 2015, a case that mirrors our age's penchant for labyrinthine logic as much as it does our capacity for judicial theatrics. Imagine the scene in the 1990s, a time of fervent legislative ambition, particularly with the Clean Air Act's amendments. This monumental undertaking was crafted to combat the noxious emissions from power plants with the noble aim of cleansing the air from their toxic plumes. In its profound wisdom, the Act entrusted the EPA with the Herculean task of regulating these dangers, hinging on its determination that such measures were appropriate and necessary, a phrase pregnant with potential, yet tantalizingly vague. Fast forward to 1998, when the EPA, in its bureaucratic ballet, decrees that regulating coal and oil-fired power plants is, indeed, appropriate and necessary. Cue the fanfare and let the regulatory choreography commence. Yet, as if in an absurd twist, by 2012, the EPA, continuing its waltz, decided to ignore the inconvenient truth of costs. Compliance costs were projected to be a staggering $9.6 billion annually, yet the EPA audaciously declared that costs should not be considered, an assertion that didn't pass without a few raised eyebrows. Now, let's turn to the Supreme Court, a veritable coliseum of judicial giants. Justice Antonin Scalia, the court's rhetorical powerhouse, thrust the EPA rationale into the spotlight. His argument being the EPA reasoning was as perplexing as a gourmet food truck in a fast food alley. Scalia contended that appropriate and necessary could not, in a meaningful sense, ignore the financial implications. Who would have thought that regulating pollution could come with such a staggering price tag? Like firing a cannon in a battle, Scalia's argument was unequivocal. Enormous costs cannot be imposed without acknowledging their scale. Meanwhile, Justice Clarence Thomas took the spotlight with his flair, advocating for re-evaluating the court's deference to agency interpretations. Thomas argued that the court should not automatically defer to an agency's interpretation of its own regulations, a principle known as Chevron deference. On the contrary, Justice Elena Kagan, the dissenting voice of reason, maintained that the EPA weighed costs and benefits. Her stance seemed to murmur, "Let's not forget the health benefits, they're somewhat significant." The Supreme Court's decision sparked reactions as polarized as a political rally. The EPA, undeterred, pledged to advance its regulations and cost-benefit analysis, like a regulatory bulldozer with a fresh coat of paint. Some hailed the ruling as a triumph for fiscal responsibility, while others saw it as a troubling disregard for public health, akin to discarding the baby with the bathwater. Ultimately, Michigan versus the EPA of 2015 is a chronicle of grand legal drama and stark contrasts. It highlights the tug-of-war between economic constraints and health imperatives, both forces vying with equal vigor. The case's outcome, which upheld the EPA authority to regulate power plant emissions despite the significant costs, has far-reaching implications for environmental policy and the balance between economic and health considerations. It's a testament to the precarious balancing act required in environmental regulation, reminiscent of a tightrope walking over a chasm of legislative dilemmas.
So, you've subjected yourself to a portion of the RPTM podcast. We'll pretend that our attempts at humor actually worked and triggered some odd spasms you might call laughter. If, by some inexplicable twist of fate, you found this clip mildly less torturous than anticipated, consider bestowing upon us the sacred thumbs-up gesture. Oh, and there's that ominous subscribe button too, a click that seals your fate, ensuring you'll be relentlessly bombarded with our future endeavors to perplex and bewilder.